Hello, you are watching Little Saigon TV today, and I'm Sophie Tran. We are here at the Chance Theater in Anaheim with the playwright Dustin Chin from Colonialism is Terrible, but Pho is Delicious. Hello, how are you doing today?
Hi, pretty good.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us here. Now, from what I hear, you are a playwright and you wrote a play about colonialism and pho.
Oh.
Yeah, can you tell us about what sparked this interest within you?
Oh, there's this video that went viral, I think in around 2016, 2017 or so, and it was for Bon Appetit, where this white chef from Philadelphia had this video that said, if you eat pho with sauce, you're eating it wrong. and it caused a dust up online with like a lot of Asian Americans, particularly Vietnamese Americans. And I just thought to myself, what's the mindset where someone can get to that point where they can grow up in they can make food and say that they are the ones that are total experts about it. Like that's their food, if they didn't grow up with it. I just thought it was such a weird way of thinking. And it made me think about the food history of Vietnam and how it came about. And I worked my way backwards. I started with like present day, and I thought, oh, let's go back in time and see how maybe there's a way to think about how we got to that kind of thinking today. So that's how it came about.
I myself saw that video and I was like, this is so triggering. Like, who are you to tell, a whole millions and generations of Asian people or Vietnamese people that we've been eating pho wrong, when that person probably just tried pho like for the first time, 5-10 years ago, So I'm glad that it sparked this within you because it actually is an important topic that we should talk about, and it's continuously, happening, not just within the Vietnamese culture, but like around the world as well. You see people just opening like taco shops and just like claiming it as like, the better way or whatever, when there's been people who've been eating tacos like that their whole lives, So just to clarify, you are not Vietnamese.
No, my sister paid for a DNA test that said we're 13%.
Oh, you are 13%.
And I don't know if I necessarily trust. It'd be great if it's true, but I'm just going to say no just to be safe.
Okay, but were you always close to the Vietnamese culture, or did this project lead you to become closer?
Well, it definitely led me to become closer, but growing up in Seattle, there's actually a pretty sizable Vietnamese community, and a lot of my friends growing up I'm from Seattle's Rainier Valley, which is in the south, which is like where a lot of Asian immigrants, including a lot of Vietnamese, grew up in. We had the best in Seattle is actually down in the Rainier Valley, so that's, if you want the good stuff, you gotta go that.
Oh, I see. That's where the good stuff is. Yeah. I see. So, what is the most interesting thing that you learned about the Vietnamese culture when you started doing research for this play?
Oh wow, there's just so much about
Really?
it, about just the history of the food and how it's the most interesting thing. Oh man, I'm gonna think about it for a while. I think what's the northern southern differences. Originally, when I first started this idea, I thought, well, what if I wrote about banh mi? Because it's the French bread part. You could tell it's from the French.
Yeah.
But then I talked to a Vietnamese friend, and she was like, no, pho is something that's closer to the hearts, and so I had to change my focus. And when I started talking to our consultant, Natalia Zong, she was talking about the northern and southern differences, and how very different they are. And so I started thinking about that and about the history and how that's tied to it, and how in so many different countries you do have that divide between North and South in terms of the way they like things, but you're still part of the same people, the same country. What I found interesting was researching some of the history is during the French colonial times, how during that time, late 19th century, I didn't know how there was like a lot of rubber production. And so the Michelin company, which makes the tires, they made the Michelin Guide in France to get more people who own cars to get out and explore French cuisine. And so there's this sense of during that time in that culinary history, at the same time, the Michelin tire company needed rubber from Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries. So what became fancy in our mind, French cuisine, in modern times, the economic conditions for that come from the resources that were taken from Southeast Asia. And what happened with what those companies did in Southeast Asia led to all these labor movements in Southeast Asia. And so when all these interconnecting things about how food relates to history and who gets to profit from these things was so fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. So how did you decide to, because I mean, out of all the research you did, there's must be like a ton of things for you to want to tell the audience, but how did you reorganize it to put it into 3 acts?
Oh, well, so I think it's very, you have to focus on, I wanted to make sure that we try to go far as back as we might be able to go. So I think that's very important. And I think what was interesting when I was doing food research was, I was working with an assistant and they found this fact how in 1999, how Burger King tried to open up their first restaurant in Vietnam, and that was after KFC. So KFC was the first Western restaurant to do that. So I thought that felt like a very interesting point in terms of food history. But I also thought about how there's so much Western media that likes to center the narrative on Americans and the American War. And I thought to myself that it's interesting for me to, learning about another culture, how there are things that the majority likes to fixate on that don't necessarily, it definitely affects people, but it doesn't necessarily define people. And so I didn't want to portray a lot of trauma on stage and have these Vietnamese characters, they are affected by certain historical events, but they're not necessarily, their day-to-day lives aren't necessarily defined by that, even though Americans may think that's the thing that that dictates their lives.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have conversations without necessarily having to recreate the really bad stuff that we see, but you can still have a serious conversation. I like to use comedy as a way to have conversation, to find another way to get into a serious conversation without making people relive things very explicitly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that the Vietnam War has affected, millions and millions of people, but that's not the only thing that happened in our history. There's so much more to be covered, and so I'm glad that we are taking an approach where we are talking about different struggles and issues, but also in a comedic, in a funny way. So working with your director and with the cast and learning so much more about the Vietnamese culture, what are some Vietnamese words that you learned?
Oh man, I think Dong Dang.
Dong Dang, huh?
The Dong Dang. Yeah. There's a scene that I'm not going to give it away, but there's like a very very important moment that revolves around that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought it's because you wanted more, lighting for the show, and then the director told you don't be too expensive.
Yeah. So that's one of the few things. I'm probably going to butcher the tones, but yeah, that's one of the words that was.
Okay.
Cool, yeah.
Okay. And what about food? Did you try a lot of Vietnamese food other than pho when you have been working with the cast?
I'm trying to focus on pho.
Okay, so you've had a lot of fun in the last few years.
Our dramaturg invited us to her family's house, and her mom made it for us, which was one of those special moments, getting to meet her parents.
Oh, okay.
And getting to make homemade fun. And she's very apologetic. She goes, "Oh, this has only been around." She only let it simmer for 36 hours. This is not the full thing.
Only 36
hours.
So,
I didn't
wow.
get the full.
Wow, I see.
Yeah.
So, how long did it take for you to, from start of researching to, being here today? How long has the process been?
Well, it's been off and on. I got into the ground floor Berkeley Rep development program, and I was in, I think, the 2018 program. So by then I only had the idea and about 10 pages. But they said that's a good enough idea. So yeah, let's go. And so I was able to do that. I did the I was able to do the Bay Area Playwrights Festival, and then I've been revisiting over the course of several years up until now. But yeah, it's been 5-6 years since I first started this. That's the way that plays go in the American theater. Is you have an idea and you put it aside, and then you have another opportunity. You get to work on it again and back and forth. But only until fairly recently, when theater started opening up again, did some theaters say like, hey, let's like put it on its feet.
I see. Yeah. Wow, that's very. I heard that this is a rolling world premiere, so you've had the chance to show your play to some audiences already. What's the reception like for your play?
Oh, a lot of laughs and a lot of, to me, surprising places, because we have audiences from a lot of different backgrounds and age-wise as well, and so some of the stuff sticks with modern foodies. Younger foodies and food culture, and some audiences so some older audiences like got jokes in a way about travel, because one of the scenes is set in 1999, so it's talking about 1999 technology and 1999, the way that things we take for granted, like the camera phones were not. It really wasn't a thing, and so. For instance, is like when you went on vacation, you had the cameras you used, the disposable ones. You couldn't snap a ton of pictures. You had to be like very, very careful about what you're taking pictures of, or even taking a picture of food was like, you're going to really use one of your shots in your camera just to take a picture of food. It was like, I'm trying to think back in the day, that must have been like such a very strange concept for people, and now it's just like, oh yeah, every single meal you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, because we don't have time to go develop those pictures of the food every single meal we have, or, just I think that's a really fun thing, especially the nostalgia, like how we used to have to print out directions before we went somewhere on Yahoo, like turn left, turn right, now we don't even have to think about it. So I'm sure that brings a lot of laughter to a lot of the audience members. What is the main message that you want to leave behind with this play?
I think one of the things that keeps on coming back to me is I want to be careful not to say that you can't start making food or doing themes that you didn't grow up with, that you don't identify with personally. But there's something to be said that when you do that, to do a lot of research and try to honor the research as much as you can. And what form does that take? I think it's a question that keeps on. I don't have the answer to that. I don't necessarily think it's for artists to have solutions as so much as questions. And I think but the question to be, for instance, in this situation is if you're not from a culture and you make food from a different culture, is there a way to give back to the people and the traditions you learn from? So that's one of the basic things.
Definitely. Like being a Vietnamese person myself, I love it when people try Vietnamese food and learn about the Vietnamese culture. So, all of my, Caucasian friends, I'm like, please come over here and eat this, and you got to try this, But there's a line between exploring and learning and trying about things about the Vietnamese culture, about culinary discovery, but to the entitlement of some people who claim it as their own invention, or that they are the ones who did it right versus how to eat pho versus all of those things. Like that is where I think we need to help bring awareness to. And I definitely think that while your play, it's lighthearted, but it reminds people in a lighthearted way, like how silly it is to even feel entitled enough to claim someone else's or someone's ancestors' food as your own,
Yeah, I figured it out. It's like, did you figure it out?
Good job. Yeah, so I'm really glad. So it's taken you a few years to put this play together. As you change and evolve as a person, do you feel that your play has also changed?
Oh, absolutely. I think that my view is comedy as a way to have difficult conversations. I feel stronger and stronger about that, and how there's a way to get people to laugh and think. That it's hard to get them to laugh, but in some ways it's easier to do that than to lecture them and expect them to have some sort of insight. So I'm more interested in questions and having conversations than saying, this is exactly what I want you to leave with. I like it better when people have something to talk with over a meal after they've seen the show and get some pho, hopefully, or some other delicious Vietnamese food, and being able to keep on going after the lights are down and after they left the theater. I think that's very important. And especially since after lockdown, coming back to the theater, and we were up in Berkeley and hearing a full audience laugh in a house together for the first time, it was so freeing in a way that this is why I still continue to work in the theater. Yeah. Because getting people to laugh together in these times, I think it's so hard, and when they do, it's the best feeling in the world. It's the reason why I think anybody who writes in comedy like I've been doing would want to continue doing that, because that human connection in the same space together is just the best.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, not only is laughter a way into someone's like heart and mind, but food is also a way into someone's heart, you know. And so for you to bring up like the topic of food and to make it funny, you know, I'm sure you've won over a lot of people, and, you know, brought up important conversations, but in a lighthearted way. So I think that's very, very smart of you.
Thanks.
So can you talk about, you know, sometimes when you write a play, you have something in your mind. Was that translated into real life, or did it turn out differently than what you thought it would be?
Well, it's very interesting how there was a moment in the play where a Vietnamese American character is asked to go to a restaurant by her white acquaintance to basically give her opinion about the food, because the white friend basically wants to outsource her opinion to the Vietnamese friend. It doesn't say from the beginning, but that's what's going on. And I see that I'm paying more attention to that dynamic, and I didn't realize how common it was, and I had to stop and think about that. How sometimes if you have like a non-Asian friend, and then they ask you like, "Hey, you want to check this thing out?" Because they're a little scared sometimes of really saying, "Is this like I'm going to get in trouble if I have this reaction to it?" Or they don't trust their own reaction to it, and they think they need to bring you as kind of like a tour guide, which is, I have many feelings about that. Like it's not clearly not the worst thing in the world, of course, but there is something about that, about how would they invite you to go to a pizza place at the same time? Sometimes like the same friend, like if you know,
what do you think
people
about this pizza? Is it authentic?
Yeah, exactly. And the question of authenticity, I think, is like such an interesting way to talk about that, because one of the questions is like, one of the big questions I have is like, who decides on that? Because I keep on thinking, doing the food research about different opinions about how to make it. It's sort of like when I was doing a little bit of research about pasta in Italy, how you can have two grandmas in the same village who have like very different opinions about what that is. And similarly, and I think in a lot of our cultures, like a lot of Asian cultures, where you have the same dish, but then two grandmas or two aunties have like very strong, it's like religion in a lot of ways, in which they have like very, very different opinions about the same thing, and they're both very good, and they're both valid in that sense. It's a gray area, and I think that gray areas are more interesting to me, and talking about people as more multidimensional, how sometimes it's hard to say. It's more interesting to go into places where there's no right and wrong. It's more you just endlessly talk about conversations, but at the end of the day, you still get to enjoy the food.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, it's all about connection. It's all about human connection, and you know, bringing up food or different topics is a great way to do that. Do you have any message that you want to send to the director of the show as well as your cast members?
Oh, the message. It's been very humbling to be able to work with so many different perspectives, and constantly, even down to the single word, cast and director and the actors are very, very so helpful in saying, oh, this word seems off. And receiving that and saying, like, yeah, I need to change it down to the single word. And they're so perceptive about identifying things that maybe if you're not used to working in theater, you may not realize just how precise it gets. But I've been constantly blessed with the team, even though we've been running it for so many times, to even last night we caught a few new things that was like, oh yeah, I've heard the scene hundreds of times, but I didn't notice how that one word, how changing that one word can make a difference, at least to us, and that's been very important.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us on Little Saigon TV. We have just talked to playwright Dustin Chin from Colonialism is Terrible, but Pho is Delicious. I'm Sophie Tran. Thank you so much for watching. Hello, you are watching Little Saigon TV, and I'm Sophie. Today I am sitting with director Oan Nguyen from Colonialism is Terrible, but Pho is Delicious. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
Great, yeah. And just right off the bat, when I hear the title of your play that you're directing, it sounds very interesting.
To say the least.
Yeah, and it's really catchy, and it's true.
Yes. Yeah. There's always sort of a pause, and then someone goes, true.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about your play?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my play. It's Dustin H. Chin's play, but I've been involved with it since 2021. We're like, it's been such a great experience for us. In 2021, as you know, we were all shut down. And everybody was just working so hard and figuring out, like, how do we stay relevant? How do we stay connected to our community while the doors were closed and nobody can come into the theater, right? So we partnered up with a theater company in the Berkeley area called Aurora Theater Company, and we decided to work together on this show over Zoom. Wow. So some of the actors were from LA, some of the actors were from Berkeley. Dustin was in New York. I was in SoCal here in SoCal, and we would rehearse over Zoom. And then when we did the final reading, it was all live over Zoom. And it was pretty wild. And then so once everything started opening, we decided it had such a good response that we decided, let's go ahead and do this as a rolling world premiere. And then later on, Oregon Contemporary Theater Company came on, and now it's a 3-part rolling world premiere.
Oh, wow, that's
So
really
super
exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about the synopsis? What can people expect?
Well, it's like the title, right? Colonialism is Terrible. It's pretty much what the title says. It's going to talk a bit about the effects of colonialism on. In some ways, it's the history of Pho, right? It takes place in 3 different timelines. So it takes place in French Indochina, 1889, and then Vietnam, 1999, right as the borders were starting to be open to Western businesses and so on and so forth. It's like just months before Clinton shows up, right? And then it takes place present day, Brooklyn, it definitely speaks a little bit about the possible history of how Pho came to be, and it talks a lot about colonialism and the oppression that's happened in Vietnam and how that leads to present day. So like. What's interesting, so in part 1, in French Indochina, we're in a French aristocrat home in Hanoi, and she has lost her chef, and she's looking for a new cook, and she is being forced into interviewing a local Vietnamese cook, and the cook is in a position where they are in need because she had just lost her husband and she's got children to raise, and she's in this position now where she may have to take a job in this French home to survive, right? So it starts there. And so that's part one. Where part two, the Vietnamese female character runs a popular local pho cart, and she's perfectly fine, and she's doing really well locally, but the businesses are opening up, and the tourists are coming in, and someone's trying to convince her that the future is in the Western tourists, right? The future is there. And then we find out very quickly that the tourists that she meets may be there for different reasons, right? As they are trying to bring American businesses or Western businesses into Vietnam. And then part three, we're in this bougie Brooklyn restaurant that's serving pho at $45 a bowl. And this Vietnamese character shows up, and she's told very early on in the scene that the pho is perfect, and she can't get any condiments or sauce to add to it because it's already perfect. And when she brings out the chef, the chef's white, and the chef was trained, in cordon bleu, but was also trained by cooks and chefs in Vietnam, and he's in his own right trying to elevate Vietnamese food, and she's having a little issue with someone white telling her how to eat her pho and charging $45 for it.
Yeah, what the pho, really? Seriously.
Well done.
So, when I hear about just the title, and then you're talking about colonialism and oppression, it sounds like two very, depressing topics. Is the show like a drama, or are there notes of humor inside?
It's hilarious.
Oh, it's hilarious.
The play is funny all throughout. Yeah, those stakes are there, but they also lead to some of the comedy. And unlike many stories in American theater, in this play, the two Vietnamese characters are the lead in all three parts, right? It's really, we're seeing the play through their eyes. And in fact, in part one and part two, we substitute the Vietnamese language. So when they're speaking Vietnamese, they're speaking standard English, right? So it normalizes their language. And so we get to see their full selves and how they think and how they feel and what, and how they respond to each other. Where when the characters are speaking French, they're speaking in like cartoon French accents. Like I keep saying Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast, right? So the tables are turned a little bit, where the Vietnamese characters are like, "What's up with these people?" Right?
Yeah.
And when the French are trying to speak Vietnamese, they speak in that broken, grade school English, and you watch them struggle. Yeah. Right, and you're watching the Vietnamese characters wonder whether or not they're even intelligent the way they're speaking, or questioning all these things, or mispronouncing French names in the same way. Like the joke of when you tell people it's pho, they say pho. Like that joke is flipped around, where it's the Vietnamese characters mispronouncing all the French names. So it's actually very, very funny throughout the play. And so then when you go to part two, when you have these American tourists have come in, when they're speaking English, they're speaking in a really funny American Southern accent. So we've been saying Mater from the Cars movies, that accent. Yeah. I can't do any of these accents, so I'm not going to try. But again, so when they're speaking American English, it's in this very funny tone. And when everyone's speaking Vietnamese, it's very standard American English. Yeah. Right?
I love that because, usually when we see Hollywood movies or all these years, anytime there is any Vietnamese representation or Asian representation, we are either the side character or we have accents, and we never get to, or the audience never gets to view the story from the Asian person's perspective. Right. So here's a story that we are retelling, and we are taking back our story. We're taking back our story of, colonization of Vietnam or many other countries, and retelling it in our way, in our own funny way. And I think that's amazing. Yeah. So how has your role as a director impacted the play, or how has the play impacted you as a director?
It's just, you know, I always think like as a Vietnamese director in the American theater, I've spent my whole life watching plays, whether it's plays or TV or film. I've always watched and identified with characters on the screen or on the stage that don't look anything like me, right? And so I think in some ways that's given me sort of this ability and it's exercised this muscle that I think not everyone exercises, right? To be able to empathize and understand all kinds of people and people who and walk in other people's shoes, right? Really thinking that way. But it's been special to work on a play that, especially in the American regional theater, like if I'm working, I tend to have to work on plays that are POC or something, right? And if it's an Asian play or it's a Vietnamese play, there's always some terrible accent that we have to deal with, you know. So it's kind of really nice to see these Vietnamese characters get to be their full selves, right? To have an audience be able to have a Vietnamese character on stage that doesn't have to be in this accent. It doesn't have to be, you know, refugee and about their trauma. I think that's another thing that Dustin's really, the stakes in all three parts are clearly there. Like I always think of part one, you know, that when part one, when the play begins, the first person you see is the Vietnamese character, and he's a servant, right? You see him serving. There's no lines. When the lines begins, it's between the two French characters, and obviously there's the aristocrat, and then there's her chef that she's borrowing to help find someone for her, and he's helping. But it's very clear in this moment that she's the boss and he's the employee, and he's very concerned about that position, and that dynamic is very concerning to him, and he's afraid of like losing his job. And then you bring in the Vietnamese character and you realize that's very different, right? For the chef, the worst thing that can happen is he could lose his job. For the servant, they might get whipped or killed, right? So that is there, all of it's there, but it's not what's happening in the moment. It's not what, the stakes are there, but that's not where the focus of the play is. So, but they're still there. So it's this lovely thing that Dustin's been able to do, which is to contextualize the trauma, contextualize, you know, all the dynamics, the political dynamics, but also still let it be a story about people, right? So when Thuy first shows up, she's never had to deal with the French. So she comes in, you know, like the other Vietnamese character is saying, you have to act properly. So the first words out of her mouth is like, hello, elder lady. Right? She's not interested in being proper in any way, shape, or form. And that's kind of neat to see in all these parts, the Vietnamese characters, you know, get to be their full selves in a way that American English-speaking audience has not seen Vietnamese characters on stage do before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's super special.
All right. So when you first read this play, what part of the play did you connect with the most?
I just don't get to work on plays with Vietnamese characters that get to speak their full selves, that are allowed to have attitudes, they're allowed to be funny, they're allowed to feel things, you know what I mean? And they're allowed to be understood. You know, it's interesting in a play where the Vietnamese characters, as an audience, as an English-speaking audience, you better understand and sympathize and empathize with these Vietnamese characters than you do the Caucasian characters. Because those are the characters now that have to deal with accents. They have to deal with trying to speak the language. And so they're the characters that you can't see their full selves because they're not able to do so. So I mean, what a lovely opportunity to tell that story from that point of view. I feel like that's so special.
So you mentioned earlier to me off screen that you have 2 little kids.
Yeah, 6-year-old twins.
Yeah. So do you feel like your work with this show will also contribute to a very important conversation that someday you hope your kids would be able to learn about, and hopefully in their time there would be more representation and less colonialism of food?
Right. Yeah, this is an interesting. Yeah, I mean, I hope. I'm already feeling like I think we all do, right? Right now, with in some ways, to see such recognition for Asian artists, obviously from the Academy Awards and so on and so forth, and even on the Broadway stages, we're starting to see a lot more representation in plays like this. Add to the canon. Right? The fact that it's a 3-theater world premiere, I think, is just incredible. Like, I can't imagine if this play was written 10 years ago that it could have been done at more than one play as a world premiere, right? So to have 3 theaters invest time and efforts and resources to tell this story, especially in areas like the Bay Area or Oregon, where they're like, we might need to fly people in because we may just not have this talent in our area, or I think it all adds. We all have to just do our parts, right? Like, and I feel like we're just doing our part now, hopefully, to make it a little bit easier for them.
Yeah, and I just want to, reiterate or talk to the audience about colonialism of food, because maybe some people might be thinking, colonialism is over now. Why are we still talking about it, right?
Is it though?
But really, if you look at it, I think that one of the things that we've seen recently are like non-Asian chefs who are creating or elevating Asian cuisine, Asian food, which, like there's a popular story about a white lady who wanted to elevate congee, which is jiao, and it's a little bit insulting saying that, like, the Asian food that we eat is not, high standard enough, and that they need to make it better, or to tell us how to eat our pho or our food, So I just want to clarify that with the audience, that this is not just talking about colonialism, but the symbolism and the silent colonialism that's still going on here today.
Well, even, while we were doing the research on the play, and Dustin can tell you all about that, Natalia, our dramaturg, can tell you all about it. But I think it was just, even the research that I did was about, like, the history of pho, right? Like, where did it come from? And how in so many Western books, they think it came from a French dish called pot au feu, right? And they even claim that pho and pho are supposed to be proof that that's the case. And then there's some books that say it came from this Chinese soup that was being served in North Vietnam around that time. And then, of course, there are things that say no, it came from a Vietnamese soup that was around many years before from the north also, right? Like, so it's just even now today, the fact that there's so many people trying to claim this dish that is so recognizable as being a Vietnamese dish.
Yeah, and especially now that, pho is so widely known, and it's become successful, suddenly everyone just wants a piece of it, literally and figuratively.
Right.
They just want to claim it and be like, oh, no, it, came from us, or, whatever.
Well, my mother's pho is still the best. So sorry.
Yeah, so, and, similarly with, like, the bánh mì, it's been a staple of the Vietnamese community for so long, and people love bánh mì, and then all of a sudden now it's bánh mì. And, like, the H is, like, in a different part of the word,
I missed this one. Why is it bánh mì? Who's saying that now?
I don't know. Well,
I always thought that was, like, a wrong pronunciation of it.
It's, like, a trend now. So, a lot of, like, mainstream restaurants are starting to serve bánh mì. it's spelled incorrectly, and they serve it. They're like, this is a banh mi salad. I'm like, that's not what a banh mi is. Banh mi means it's a sandwich.
Like literally starts.
It literally means sandwich, you know. But then they have like a banh mi salad and a banh mi soup, and I'm just like, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, like a banh mi bowl or something.
Yeah,
just recently came out,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they're just trying to go.
And there was like no banh mi ingredients in it.
Yeah, and that's what we call like appropriation, cultural appropriation. You know, it's like you weren't there to understand all of our struggles, and then all of a sudden when it's become successful, you just take like the best part of, you know, something, and then you make your own money off of it.
Right.
You know, so that's appropriation.
So yeah, that's definitely discussed in this play.
Yeah, exactly. So that's colonialism of food. And so I'm really glad, like, as soon as I saw the name of this show, I was like, wow, like, I have to see this. This is definitely a topic that we need to talk about and we need to be more aware of. You know, it's, you know, obviously it's not something that means that we have to like go out and get justice for or advocate for, you know, but it's something that we need to be aware of as a community, because it's like these little microaggressions of, you know, of our work and of the work of our ancestors that we need to pay respect to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, lastly, speaking of food, what is your favorite Vietnamese food?
Bánh xèo.
You said that without hesitation.
No, there's no question. Ask my mother. She will tell you. She always says, like, you can come visit. What do you want? I want bánh xèo. And then, like, you know, like the next time I visit, she says, what do you want? You come visit. What do you want? I said, bánh xèo. You say that every single time. I go, because I don't get bored of it.
Stop asking that.
Yeah, I feel like you should know the answer.
Yeah. Well, that's really great. Well, thank you so much for spending your time here today with us. And I wish you the best luck on your show, and I can't wait to see it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Little Saigon TV. We just met director Oanh Nguyen from Colonialism is Terrible, but Pho is Delicious. I'm Sophie Tran. Thank you so much for tuning in.